everyone, and welcome to the Surgical Ergonomics Podcast, where we will be discussing everything related to surgical and procedural ergonomics, the people, ideas, and technology that will help enhance your physical wellness and career longevity. I am your host, Geeta Lal. I'm an academic endocrine surgeon, speaker, consultant, and surgical ergonomics coach. Having experienced work-related musculoskeletal injury myself, I am committed to increasing awareness of and developing solutions to counteract the impact of poor ergonomics on the professional and personal lives of healthcare workers in procedural areas. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Pearson Ravitz. For many of you, your career is your calling, so don't let an unforeseen injury or accident take that away. Pearson Ravitz, a firm founded by a physician, specializes in disability and life insurance tailored for healthcare providers like you. They understand the risks you face and offer real education and guidance. It's about more than a policy. It's about peace of mind. Head to surgicalergonomics.com/podcast/ and click on the Pearson Ravitz logo to take the first step in protecting your future. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Surgical Ergonomics Podcast. In today's episode, I'm really pleased to have as our guest Barbara Van Gorp, Doctor of Physical Therapy. Barb is a clinical specialist in orthopedics with Iowa Orthopedics, sports medicine, and rehab within the University of Iowa healthcare system. She has nearly 25 years of clinical experience. In addition, Barbara completes research on the management of chronic spine pain and tendinopathy pain and management within the Carver College of Medicine Rehab Sciences. She has presented her work at state, national, and international conferences. In her free time, she enjoys painting, nature, and outdoor scenes, in addition to bike riding, hiking, gardening, and cooking for her family and friends. Good morning, Barb, and welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Geeta, for having me. It's good to be here.
Wonderful. Let's get going. So, Barb, could you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, including kind of where you grew up, your training background, and how you arrived at your current role?
Sure. So I am a native Iowan. I grew up way in Northwest Iowa, and I then went to physical therapy school in Wisconsin at Concordia University of Wisconsin. Graduated back then and graduated as a master's and then went back for my clinical doctorate, which I finished in 2004, and started working a little bit with part of being in school sometimes in Wisconsin is we had a whole industrial rehab semester. So we were exposed to a little bit more of how people use or did not use ergonomics at the time back in the late 1990s and early 2000s. I came to Iowa then. I was there. I worked out in Wisconsin for 7 years and just needed to be back by family. So came back and I am at the University of Iowa ever since then. I'm on my almost 19th year.
So that we have one more thing in common then, right? This was my first job out of training, and I'm here at Iowa too now, 21 years for me. So
Yes.
about the same time. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I wanted to share with our listeners actually that even though it sounds like we've been here for almost an equal length of time as we just found out, I actually first met Barb many years ago when I started undergoing physical therapy for my jaw and neck pain, which I've mentioned before on this podcast. And so I wanted to ask you, Barb, I remember something you said at that time when I first met you. You said that, I wasn't alone and that you had treated other surgeons and staff who work in the OR, including anesthesiologists, and
Yes.
and not just you and your partners, obviously.
Correct.
And that went a long way to kind of reducing my feelings of shame and stigma because I did feel like I was alone at the time. No one in surgery talks about this. So tell me,
No.
how did you become interested in this area of ergonomics for physicians and surgical personnel?
Well, I would say that over the years here, I've seen quite a few of our own staff
Mhm.
for this issue that happens because you guys are in this one position for an extended period of time, and a variety of people have a variety of heights. So we have people who are working hard, probably overworked, understaffed type of thing, and have these repetitive stress injuries.
Mhm.
So that kind of started it. And then I also have done some lectures. I started doing lectures for the dental school on their ergonomics, mostly due to I went to the dental school for my own care, and my own
Mm.
dentist was talking about his issues along with his dental assistant was having problems. So they needed some care for their upper, I call it the upper quadrant, into the neck, shoulders, shoulder blade areas, and arms.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then it just kind of has morphed into more as I've gotten to know you and gotten to know other different physicians and surgeons that we have on staff here that ask for some education on it and for some different lectures or anything of that sort.
Right, right. So thank you for sharing that, Barb. And, I want to clarify what you said about the dentistry sort of staff and students for our listeners. For everyone, Barb was the inspiration for me actually thinking about doing an ergonomics curriculum at the University of Iowa, especially when, during one of my sessions, she actually mentioned this fact that she actually was working with students in dentistry about proper posture and that she was giving lectures to them. And this was in response to, I think, a query that I had because I was miserable. And I said, well, how come no one tells you that this can happen from, working as a surgeon? And
Yeah.
I think your response was, well, I don't know. The dentists seem to know this, and I give them lectures. And that's kind of where this idea of this curriculum started. So I have to acknowledge that, that conversation was fortuitous in that, it started us thinking about this and then collaborating together on doing the
Correct.
curriculum for general surgery, doing a talk for cardiothoracic surgery, and even for some of the surgeons in India, right? Based on
Yes.
our
Yep.
contact, Sanjay Yadav, who also has actually done a podcast episode. So
Correct.
coming back to those days, the other thing I want to let people know, we've talked about this, I think, in our massage therapy episode a little bit about upper cross syndrome and lower cross syndrome. And I remember as you were releasing kind of these really tight muscles around my thoracic spine, I kind of was mumbling something about how getting old was no fun and how come all these things were happening. And you reminded me that actually the symptoms that I was experiencing were, had less to do with age, maybe a little bit, but more to do with this forward head posture that we see, with people using their phones, right? Something called text neck, because there was a 19-year-old about two tables down from me. One of your partners was working on him.
Oh my
And
goodness,
his,
you remember that?
yeah, yeah. Well, I have an elephant's memory, unfortunately. So here we go. So you actually said, well, Gita, it's not about age. I mean, that 19-year-old has the same injury pattern as you. My partner's releasing his thoracic spine muscles. And that's when I started sort of paying attention to, what you described to us as like forward head posture, what the end result is. And that's really kind of the root cause of what we experience in the operating room and also what desk workers while they're working long hours on a
Oh,
computer experience, right? It's very similar. So could you
yeah.
elaborate on what constitutes this,
Upper
upper
cross
cross
syndrome.
syndrome? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, upper cross syndrome was physician Vladimir Yanda.
Okay.
And this was developed in like the 30s or 40s. And it's basically a posturing that happens. I call it more repetitive stress, right? So we're always working on computers nowadays. Most
Right.
of our jobs have gone to different things that we are always in forward flexion. We don't do a lot of moving around for the most part. Great thing about being a physical therapist is I do get to move around in my job, but a lot of people don't get to move around in their jobs.
Mhm.
So their muscles start becoming shortened and weaker by being in this one position because our muscles were really there to help us move and not just be in one position all day. We have postural muscles, but we also have muscles that are made to move through a full range.
Mhm.
And then they start adapting, just like all tissue adapts with stress put on it. And you start having aches and pains because that brings in, different signals from the brain when you have short and weak muscles and then you try to use them or you stay in one positioning. So that changes how we feel things and how our brain actually responds in the pain centers to movement after you've been in this shortened position.
So what we end up experiencing, please correct me if I'm misstating then, is that, if you see us as a physical therapist, what you see is shortened anterior muscles, right? And weak posterior muscles. Is that kind of a fair description of upper
Yeah,
arm
it's a
syndrome?
short form of it. Yeah, it's a
Okay. Yeah.
short
As
form
I
of
said,
it.
it's a very, that's my sort of basic understanding of it. Yeah.
Yep, it's a short form of that is correct. So on the front side, you will be tight
Hmm.
and weak or shortened and weak. And then you may be lengthened and weak on the back side.
Backside. I
Okay.
see.
But not, or just not even firing right. So it becomes that you aren't even engaging those muscles. Like, how do you wake those muscles up? Is
Yeah.
kind of what happens when they're stretched out over time and not being used like they should be.
Right. And this can happen, as you said, in the upper spine as well as the lower spine.
Correct.
And I've read, and again, please correct me if I'm misstating, that this is kind of the sort of chronic posture changes, etc., that then kind of lead to degenerative changes in the spine, like disc disease, like shoulder issues. At least these are contributing feature. And then if gone on long enough, people present like me with jaw pain, and neck pain together
Yeah.
with nothing wrong with the TMJ joint itself.
Well, so that's correct to a certain extent that, they start to change how we move, which can affect the biomechanics, but there's also like genetics that
Of course.
impacts your different degenerative changes. And then there's also just pain. So, everything's innervated. So how, why you felt it in your jaw was that pain becomes peripheralized
Right.
from that pain center in the brain and the homunculus. If you think of that, it kind of smudges out into different areas on the homunculus within our brain. So you start feeling things from, let's say, the back of your neck up into your jaw based on innervation, referral patterns.
Got it. So this is sort of that homunculus expanding, if it were.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
By
It's
having pain for a long period of time. So once it
right.
becomes chronic, and we think of chronic pain in physical therapy as that same pain being there for greater than 3 months is all.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, by the time I came to you, I had definitely had pain for longer than 3 months. It was closer to
Mhm.
6 months. So definitely
Yes.
chronic. And so I just want to clarify. I heard you say peripheralized. It's actually centralized, right? Not peripheralized.
No, it's not, don't think of it biomechanically. It's how the
Okay.
nerve works. So we
Okay.
have like localized pain, then we have localized pain that is not centralization of pain. So like neuroplasticity, where you have a true neuropathic pain,
Okay.
it is not that. So it's just you
Okay.
have a local pain
Mm-hmm.
that is on an acute injury,
Mm-hmm.
then because of the pain signals, that may just peripheralize out a little bit into regions close to it, versus whole body pain when we think of neuropathic pain, such as a fibromyalgia and a chronic pain syndrome, that type of thing. That's
I
kind of the
see.
third stage of pain.
We
We
were
are
talking
only,
about, yeah, is referred pain, right? So referred pain to the jaw.
yes, it's referred type of pain to the jaw.
Got it. Okay, this is all, so helpful. It was helpful to me then, and I find I keep learning new things every time I chat with you,
Hmm.
Barb. So thank you. Okay, now comes this piece. Okay, so people have pain. Let's say they're in the OR and they're experiencing pain, and it's really hard for them to get to. They've been prescribed physical therapy, either by their primary care physician or their,
Self-referred, they
yeah,
can come in however they need to. Yep.
right. So maybe they self-referred and they went to physical therapy. So a lot of people say, well, they gave me some exercises. I did them. I didn't notice a difference, or maybe I noticed a difference. So I guess I'd like to spend some time talking with you about what is the mechanism by which physical therapy can help these injuries and chronic symptoms that we just talked about.
So mechanisms, I would say there's many mechanisms that kind of make up this. We're talking about the basic biomechanics here of kind of muscle joint movement. That's
Sure.
one aspect of it. So yes, we really work on trying to get you to have stronger kind of scapular stabilizers. Deep neck flexors is another one that you've worked on. Posterior cuff of your shoulder. We work on all those. In addition to that, it's getting you to do just regular movement instead of, there's some learning on how do we deal with positioning.
Hmm.
There's that aspect of it. There's aspects of if it's really strong pain, can you use different modalities to help? That can be heat, that can be ice, that can be a transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation unit.
Hmm.
Different modalities that way that we know in research can support some sort of pain relief. And then it's the other aspect is, there's many aspects to it, like the psychosocial aspect of it. Like, how do you deal with the stress? Because I, as a PT, would find surgery to be an extremely stressful thing to do. How do you deal with maybe short staff or someone being off, and how that all influences your pain in your sympathetic system that day while you are in surgery? And then if you have a long-term continued pattern of that, plus the poor posturing, that all adds up. So we really work on trying to do mind body, giving you some
Hmm.
ideas that way. In the past, a free website has been the Michigan Pain Center. The University of Michigan has a great pain center out there. It
Hmm.
is then thinking about how you can have a schedule of doing regular exercise and what you can change within the kind of ergonomic setup and the whole process of surgery so you're not standing there for 4 to 6 hours at a time, retracting and in those loops bent over. That's the things that it's a whole compassing of different aspects to care.
Yeah. Well, this is all so good to revisit and very important knowledge that I don't think, surgeons, anesthesiologists, nurses working in the OR actually have. And I'll say this because I didn't, have it. And I
Yeah.
remember you asked me, so we were working on sort of, as you said, the biomechanics, but I actually remember you asking me, let me see if I can remember the phrase. What's going on in your head? What's going on with other aspects of your life? Do you have support? Are you, able to get good sleep? You asked me that, right? So
Yeah, that's a
all,
part of it.
yeah, all those things. So for every one of us who thinks, well, I'm going to go to a PT, they're going to give me a bunch of exercises. What I'm trying to convey is that it is more than a bunch of exercises, right? It's a holistic mind-body assessment and a treatment plan to encompass getting this acute pain relief. We did trigger point releases. I
Yep, we did that.
yeah,
We
yeah.
sometimes do dry needling. I forgot
Right,
about
I was
that.
going to
Yep,
say
sometimes we
dry
do that.
needling. Yeah, dry
Yep.
needling. All of those things. I remember we tried TENS. I know we did. I had been living with a heating pad, like hugging it for,
Yes.
6 months
Yeah.
prior to coming to see you. And I think only maybe in the last few weeks, I found my heating pad underneath my bed covered in, dust bunnies. And I realized, oh my God, I haven't traveled with my heating pad for over 2 or 3 years. And
That's
that
good.
yeah, and that was my life. I mean, I constantly had, I would come home from whether it was an OR day or not an OR day, it didn't matter at that time. I was so far along that pain cycle, as you had said, that I could not imagine going anywhere without a heating pad, so I traveled with it. So I hope that people are listening to this and realize that it's more than, well, just some exercises. So that's why it becomes really important for a physical therapist to become part of your team when you're experiencing these work-related symptoms and injuries.
Oh,
So
thanks. Yeah, we're here to
yeah,
help.
yeah. No, and that's absolutely it. So I know you said people can, self-refer, and I've definitely done that as well. But what do you say to people who say, well, I don't have time for physical therapy? Because I've had the same response when we talk about massage, right? So I don't
Yep.
I don't have time for physical therapy. Can't I just come for 1 or 2 sessions? Like, what is a typical treatment course? Like, how long do people need to come for? So if you could address some of these things, that
Sure.
would be great.
It's very dependent on how severe your pain is and how long you've had, how chronic the symptoms are.
Yeah.
Just hearing that statement, I don't have time for PT, immediately my head goes to, well, do you want time for yourself? And, you have to establish time for yourself and care for yourself to feel better, even as a surgeon. That is important. Or anesthesia or anybody who's in the surgical suite.
Mhm.
I think it can range from, I would say 3 to 4 visits to maybe 12.
Mhm. Mhm.
It so depends on the severity. Just like you, we have insurance that we do bill unless people do want a private pay. We at the university don't do private pay. We do only if you don't have insurance. But sometimes insurance dictates how much you can have, and that is around 20 visits a year for basic kind of payer insurance, so private insurances.
I see.
But for the most part, I mean, I think people do not need 20 visits a year. They
Mm.
can usually work on this spaced out. You don't need to come in 3 times a week or even twice a week. We can space it out for 1 time every other week. Our goal is to really educate you on how to become a management of this issue because you probably are not going to quit surgery. You're going to have to figure out somehow how to make changes within your department and changes in you in order to continue to do surgery.
Right, right. All very important points. And that's why I asked this question, because we've had this discussion about culture in surgery, and
Yes.
it comes
Yeah.
up in almost every podcast episode.
Correct.
And my question about, I don't have time for physical therapy is because I faced some of those same questions, right? And I can,
Correct.
for a resident or a trainee, that becomes even harder. When do
Yeah.
they, at least as staff, I had some control on my schedule, but for trainees, it's even harder. And so it's good to be able to hear that, it doesn't have to be 3 times a week. You could come
No.
getting, at least an assessment and figure out what you can do. You don't have control as a trainee of your work environment or the table height. We're trying to address all those other issues in other ways,
Yes. Yeah.
but at least know that you have some control over what you can do to, strengthen and stretch, right? As we talked about for the
Correct.
upper and
Hmm.
lower cross syndromes, but also start to think about these other things, how you're going to alter what you do when you have more control so that you can enhance your career
Career.
longevity
Yeah.
and sustainability, right? Because this is a career that is important to us and takes a long time to train for. So we want to make
Correct.
sure that we have career longevity.
Right. And it's also like just self-management, I would say. So we here in the United States, I feel, and are not as great, and there's probably other countries also, but
Yeah.
we do our job, we work a lot, and then
Yeah.
we go home and sit and watch TV, the general, and we really need to think of how do we manage to stay strong, right?
Hmm.
So from as a PT, we really want you to continue to have muscle strength when you're in your mid 50s. There's no reason why you can't have strength in your 50s.
Right.
So we want you to work on the ability to continue to have this
Hmm.
strong upper extremities, strong posterior cuff, strong scapular stabilizers. So you're going to have to somehow work in 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day. I mean, I'm a PT, I'm in my mid 50s. I have to work on maintaining strength to be able to do my job.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
I can imagine that things that you do, and actually I've heard massage therapists say the same thing, that, they have to take care of their hands and their shoulders
Yes,
in order to do their jobs. So well said that, it behooves all of us to take care of our physical selves, because it affects not just career longevity, but quality of life as we age.
correct.
Okay,
You're only
well,
given one body. We can
right,
replace parts, but
right, right,
not
right.
that well.
Right. So then comes my question about, let's say, sustainability of a physical therapy or strengthening, stretching program that we start, right? So I remember asking you this. That's why I want to ask this question on the podcast. I remember when we kind of met several months later when we were doing kind of a talk for somebody else. And you asked me how things were going. I said, I'm better, but I fall off the physical therapy wagon and I don't do my exercises. And then I'm reminded why I need to keep doing them. So why is it that once we start to kind of work on the body mechanics, the rewiring, all the mechanisms by which PT is supposed, it's not, I shouldn't say it's supposed to, does help our symptoms. Why is it that we have to keep doing it or the symptoms come back? I mean,
Well, because we're
why isn't it a
humans.
permanent fix?
Well, there's two reasons, I think. So, A, you go back to your same posturing every day in the OR, right?
Sure,
That you're
sure.
there.
Yeah,
And then those same stressors are probably there. So you just kind of hunch forward and do your job.
yeah,
And then, secondly, we're humans. And once we start feeling good, we kind of discontinue doing our exercises.
right.
And that's just human nature, right? We move on to something else or we
Life
find
is
something
busy.
else.
Life is busy.
Life is busy. And I mean, I kind of think of it as, it's just what we get used to doing. And then we don't really always like exercise. Some people just don't like to exercise. Us in PT, we tend to like exercise better. But there are others who don't. That's not a problem. However, you have to realize that our bodies do best when they move. I mean, we could go down to the cellular level and, they need to have water in our cells. That's what those cellular contractions are doing. So we need to have well hydrated cells. That happens with movement. That's why there's contractions. So that really helps to improve us. And so you have to keep up with doing exercises as a maintenance program, especially when you're in a job that just precludes you to going into that forward flexion, static posturing all day, and then you add whatever stressors your job is having on you to increase that sympathetic tone. So it's something that you just constantly have to work at. There's not like a one-time fix it all.
Got it. So for those of you who have gone to PT and experienced the benefits, here's your reminder, like we sometimes tell our patients, it's like hypertension. Just because, the blood pressure gets better when you take the pill doesn't mean you stop taking the
Correct.
blood
Exactly.
pressure, you stop taking the pill. This is something you have to keep working at, and it has to become part of our routines. And as Barb pointed out, it's 10, 15 minutes of movement, right?
Yep.
It's not a
Top
lot.
five exercises. That's what I like to say. Just choose the top five exercises a day.
Okay. Well, since you brought it up, I'm going to ask, what are Barbara's top five highest yield exercises for surgical trainees and surgeons and any proceduralist working in this forward head posture? And, if you have some sort of, links to these exercises, I'd be happy to include them in the show
Mm.
notes, along with that link for the University of Michigan pain,
Pain
center
center.
that you mentioned. Yeah.
So the big ones are kind of, your upper cervicals get tight. So a lot of times it's taking a tennis ball and just working on tongue goes on the roof of mouth. You just nod your chin down like you're saying yes and push back on those tennis balls. Then we work on kind of just opening up the pecs. So we do a lot of what I call shoulder kind of ER and abduction. So you put your hands on top of your head and bring those wings way out to the side or the elbows out to the side. So you feel that pec minor stretching and getting you into full external rotation. Working on then strengthening the scapular stabilizers. The big one was a pull down W, which I like to do with bands. You can also do it with free weights over a ball. Really getting that kind of mid trap area to work. Another one is like a letter Y or a letter V, just sliding up into that on the wall and then lifting those hands back. That's probably four. Planks. I don't like necessarily prone planks, but I like side planks,
I
even on your
see.
knees to
Yeah.
get you, and you got to be in a straight line. You can't have your hips flexed. So those are
Okay.
kind of, I would say, top five things that you could easily do daily with a
Mhm.
couple of rubber bands and work on at least having something to help you maintain some form.
Agreed, agreed. And for people wondering, I actually learned that trick I've often talked about, which is the massage using the tennis balls and the lacrosse balls from Barb. So what she described, I used to do that on my trapezius and upper scapula because there were so many trigger points. So the using those tennis balls are or lacrosse balls are helpful for releasing kind of tight muscle areas as well. So I learned
For
that
sure.
from Barb. I still have in almost every travel suitcase, the bands that you gave me then. Some of them I've had to replace, but just doing some of the basic things that you described, it doesn't take very long. You've traveled, you're in a hotel room, you can do that with bands anywhere, right? So
Correct.
what we're trying to say for our listeners is that it doesn't have to be this humongous effort where you have to go to the gym, you have to do this, that, these things can be incorporated into your daily routines and they will go a long way to preserving your physical wellness and strength for the work that you love to do. So Barb, I'm always amazed, as I say all the time, the time that we set aside for the podcast goes by so quickly because we're having these
Yes.
interesting conversations. So just in these last couple of minutes, I was wondering if, you could give sort of one piece of parting advice for surgical or 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 procedural personnel from what you have seen in your almost 20-year career here. One kind of piece of advice.
One piece. Oh, goodness. I think the big thing is finding that time to have self-care daily of 15 or 20 minutes. You have to have that exercise time. If that means you split it up between cases and do 15, 20 minutes, if it's too busy at home because you have little ones or a lot of, elder parent care, whatever it is, you need to have some time to have self-care. And I think in healthcare, in general, we're pretty good at forgetting about that you have to self-care, which includes, physical therapists. We have to do that too. We have to make sure that we work on our strength, work on time away if you can. And that may be going for a walk even. I just need you to do something else besides being that forward flex posture, and having hobbies of video games would be another thing not to have.
Right. Great. Thank you. And on that note, I also want to extend my gratitude to you for all the work you've done with me over the years and continue to do as we try to spread awareness and talk about the
Yeah.
them. And for everything that you do, all day, every day to take care of all of us physicians aren't the easiest patients to deal with. So I appreciate everything that you do to keep us well and functioning. So thank you again.
Welcome. That's what we in PT are here to do. Really work on that whole kind of musculoskeletal system.
Please remember to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media, Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We love feedback, so please reach out to us for topics, ideas, speakers, or if you ever want to be a guest on the show. Thank you for listening.